Forest Road wasn't on any map. That was the first thing I checked. No signposts, no markers. Just a narrow gravel track cutting through dense pine, winding higher into the mountain where the air thinned and sound carried too far. The kind of road that only existed because someone powerful needed it to. I killed the engine 100 meters short of the gate and listened. Wind through trees, distant birds, nothing mechanical. The vault wasn't underground in the way people imagined. No secret Nazi bunker left over from the war. No ancient ruin. This was modern, a reinforced storage facility carved into the mountainside and disguised as a forestry operations center. Timber permits, environmental grants, a shell company owned by another shell company, all the way back to a name that hadn't existed since 1946. That was how stolen history survived, not hidden. Normalized. I moved on foot the rest of the way, keeping the slope between me and the structure. The building blended well if you didn't know what to look for. Concrete faced with timber panels, green roof, solar arrays angled just right to look civilian. 2 security cameras, 1 real guard. That told me everything I needed to know. Places that expected trouble had layers. This place expected silence. I waited until the guard's footsteps faded behind the building, then crossed the clearing fast, staying low. The service door sat under an overhang that blocked the cameras from above, which was the only reason I'd chosen it. The lock was electronic. I pulled a slim bypass kit from my pocket, popped the panel with a flat tool, and exposed the wiring. My gloves were thin enough to work, thick enough to keep my fingerprints off everything. 2 wires, a clip, a pulse. The keypad blinked once and went dead. I slid a tension tool into the mechanical backup cylinder and turned, slow and steady. The tumblers gave one by one, no drama, just work. The door clicked open. I slipped inside and pulled it shut behind me, letting the latch catch without a sound. The interior smelled like clean wood and cold metal. The hall lights were low, night mode, with motion sensors that would spike brightness if I moved too fast. I didn't move too fast. I followed the corridor past offices that looked staged. No personal clutter, no half-finished projects. Desks wiped clean, chairs tucked in, framed certificates that meant nothing. A building that wanted to look legitimate to anyone who came during the day, and empty enough to be forgotten at night. At the end of the hall, a heavier door waited, reinforced, with a camera over it and a keypad to the right. This one mattered. I stood under the camera's blind spot, just out of view, and listened. Nothing. No voices, no humming of nearby equipment. Only the faint sound of ventilation and the occasional tick of metal cooling. I took out a card emulator and tapped it to the reader. The device chirped and flashed red. The system refused it. So I tried the next approach. I peeled back a strip of trim under the keypad, found the service access port, and clipped in. The screen on my handheld flickered as it spoke to the lock. A modern system, layered with corporate security, but it still relied on predictable routines. Those routines were the crack you slipped through. I sent a reset request, then injected the credential I'd built from intercepted data. Not a fake identity, not a forgery, just a carefully assembled lie made from real pieces. The reader beeped. Green. The heavy door released with a soft hydraulic sigh. I stepped through and felt the temperature drop. Cooler, drier, controlled. The air had that sterile quality of expensive preservation, like a museum that didn't want you there. The vault level was not designed to impress. It was designed to endure. Smooth concrete, recessed lighting, cameras tucked into corners, and no signage that said what anything actually was. A corridor that led deeper into the mountain like a throat. I kept moving. The vault entrance sat behind another security partition, thicker than the last. This time it wanted biometrics. I didn't have them. I had time. I opened my kit again, pulled out a small canister, and sprayed a faint mist onto the fingerprint scanner. The surface clouded for a moment, then cleared. A thin polymer film settled over the glass. Then I pressed a molded print into it, held for a second, and lifted away. The scanner read the pattern as if it had been left by a real thumb, because the system wasn't thinking about human intention. It was reading shapes. The lock accepted it. The partition unlocked. I stepped into the vault chamber and understood immediately that this place was built by people who wanted to keep what they stole. The chamber was carved into rock, reinforced with steel ribs, climate-controlled to a precise range. Storage racks lined the walls, each slot holding a sealed case, cataloged in a sterile numbering system. Paintings behind ballistic glass, sculptures suspended in padded frames, crates with shock sensors and humidity seals. Everything protected, nothing loved. I didn't browse, I didn't admire. I didn't waste seconds looking at a gallery of grief. I went straight to K17. The case was there. Original dimensions, original frame. Protective glass that made the surface look like the painting was behind water. I knelt, wiped away a film of condensation, and saw the burn mark on the lower corner of the frame. The Vermeer was real. It had been real all along. I released the case from its mount, and the harness took the weight. My shoulders tightened as it settled, but it was manageable. Heavy enough to matter, not too heavy to move. Then the lights changed. Not flashing, not alarms. They dimmed slightly, like the building had blinked. A subtle system response. A routine check triggered by a mount release. I froze and listened. At first, nothing. Then a soft click echoed down the corridor, followed by the low murmur of a radio. Someone was coming. I moved. I didn't sprint. Sprinting made noise, and noise brought guns. I moved fast and controlled, dragging the harness behind me, staying near the wall where the cameras had less coverage. The corridor ahead ended in a stairwell. I headed for it. The first guard appeared at the far end, rounding the corner with a rifle held low. Not raised yet, still in that half-alert posture of someone responding to a quiet anomaly. His eyes dropped to the harness, to the case, and I watched the moment the truth formed in his head. His mouth opened. I shot him before sound came out. He went down hard, the rifle clattering against the concrete. The second guard was already moving behind him, faster, smarter. He raised his weapon and fired. The round punched the wall near my head, showering dust and fragments. I dropped behind the stairwell frame and fired back through the gap. He stumbled, hit the wall, and slid down, still breathing, still trying to bring the rifle up. I put a second round into his chest and he stopped trying. That was the moment the facility stopped pretending it was quiet. An alarm sounded, low and controlled, the kind of tone you heard in private buildings with private problems. The lights shifted to red, not for panic, but for coordination. Doors I'd passed through began to lock automatically. Not all at once, but in a sequence designed to box me in. Containment. I ran up the stairs, hauling the case. My arm burned, my shoulders screamed. I ignored it. Pain was a price, not a barrier. At the upper landing, a security shutter slammed down in front of the corridor that led to the service entrance. Metal hit metal with finality. They were cutting off the obvious exits. I changed direction, heading deeper into the facility. I'd studied the layout from a distance, but maps lied. Buildings always did. What mattered was finding the routes meant for maintenance, not people. I kicked open a door marked Restricted and slipped into a utility corridor lined with conduit and pipes. The air smelled of dust and grease. No cameras here or fewer. Footsteps hammered behind me, more guards. This time they weren't walking calmly, they were moving with purpose, and that meant whoever controlled the facility had confirmed what I'd taken. I turned a corner and nearly collided with a man in black tactical gear. He raised his pistol. I raised mine first. We fired at the same time. His round clipped my arm, hot and tearing, and mine hit his shoulder, spinning him into the wall. He dropped his weapon and lunged with a knife. I slammed the case into him, using its weight like a battering ram. He went down, wind knocked out, eyes wide in shock. I didn't finish him. Not yet. I stepped over him and kept moving. The problem with carrying a priceless painting is that you do not get to move like a ghost. You move like a person dragging a secret through narrow corridors while the people who own the secret chase you. I reached a maintenance junction where the corridor split. One path led toward the main building. The other dipped into unfinished rock, a service tunnel used for ventilation and power. I took the tunnel. It narrowed quickly, forcing the case to scrape against the wall. The rock was cold and damp. My breathing sounded loud in my own ears. Blood ran down my sleeve and soaked into my glove. Behind me, the guards slowed. They weren't afraid. They were thinking. A calm voice came over a speaker somewhere in the tunnel, distorted by the rock. "Adriana Villa," the voice said. He knew my name. I didn't answer. He continued anyway. "You have something that belongs to me." I kept moving, following the tunnel's slope upward. I could smell pine now faintly, which meant there was an exit ahead. "You're not leaving with it," he said, still calm. "Not alive." There was no theatrical villain speech, no bragging, just a statement of intent. I reached the service door at the end of the tunnel. It was a heavy steel hatch with a manual wheel lock, the kind used in industrial facilities to seal off sections in emergencies. Whoever designed this place had built redundancy into everything. I spun the wheel. It didn't move. I set the case down gently because even now I did not treat it like cargo. Then I pulled my kit again, but this time I didn't choose finesse. I placed a small charge on the hinge side, measured and precise. enough to break the hinge pins, not enough to bring the mountain down. Footsteps approached behind me, close now. I stepped back, raised my weapon toward the darkness, and detonated the charge. The hatch blew inward with a sharp metallic crack, and cold forest air rushed into the tunnel like salvation. A guard appeared at the tunnel mouth as the smoke drifted. He saw the open hatch and fired. I dropped, rolled, and returned fire. He went down and didn't get back up. Another guard moved in behind him, using the rock for cover. I could hear his breathing, controlled, patient. He wasn't trying to win with speed, he was trying to win with certainty. I leaned out, fired once, and let him flinch. Then I grabbed the case and hauled it through the hatch into the forest. The night hit me hard. Cold air, pine needles, the open space of trees, and darkness. The facility behind me was invisible from this angle, hidden by terrain and careful design, but the guards could still follow. Their flashlights cut through the trees behind me, thin beams that swung in coordinated arcs. They were sweeping the forest like they owned it. I didn't run straight. I moved across the slope, using the trees to break line of sight, forcing them to guess which direction I'd taken. The case bounced against my hip. Pain flared in my arm. My breath came harsh, but I kept it controlled. A shot cracked behind me, and a tree barked splinters near my head. I dropped, pressed myself against the ground, and listened. 2 sets of footsteps now, closing from different angles. They were trying to flank me. Good, that meant they thought I was alone and desperate. I slipped the case behind a fallen log, took a position uphill, and waited. The first guard came into view, rifle up, flashlight sweeping. He moved cautiously, eyes searching for movement. I shot him once in the head, and the light fell into the leaves. The second guard froze. He turned, raised his weapon toward where he thought the shot came from. I changed position, fired again. He dropped with a sound that was more surprise than pain. Silence returned, thick and heavy. I waited longer than I wanted to, listening for more. Nothing. No radios, no shouted orders. Either those 2 were the last close responders, or the rest had decided not to chase into the dark where their cameras couldn't help them. I grabbed the case and moved. My extraction vehicle waited farther down the mountain, hidden off the road where the forest swallowed it. I reached it as the first hint of dawn began to thin the sky. I loaded the Vermeer into the back, secured it, and sat behind the wheel for 3 seconds with my forehead against my hands, letting my pulse slow. Then I drove. By the time anyone discovered the bodies, I was already gone. The Vermeer disappeared again, but this time into protected custody. Not a public museum, not an exhibition, not a headline. A quiet place that understood the difference between ownership and stewardship. The vault stayed where it was, buried in trees and money and lies. If the man who ran it wanted revenge, he could try.